Today, I want to talk about quilting choices. Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and in two previous videos, I was talking about this quilt that I made for my parents' 65th wedding anniversary, and I was talking about what I would do a little differently to, if I was going to make it again, to emphasize the parts of the quilt that I wanted to. And of course, when you're quilting, you also want to emphasize certain parts of your design. So in this particular case, what I wanted to emphasize was the two heart shapes that are in the quilt. So to me, those are the two focal points of the quilt, one in the upper left, one in the bottom right, and then the other part of the quilt is what I consider background. So typically you want your focal points to stand out and you want the background to recede. So how can you do this with your quilting? That's what I want to talk about today. So first off, what I would do is I would stitch in the ditch around those heart shapes, as you can see in this image here. Now, it's not, you might be stitching through a block, part of a block, not necessarily around a block, because these are all strip piece blocks, so there's all these different seams in them. So you would be, going along through those. But what you're doing when you're stitching in the ditch, I mean, no one really likes to stitch in the ditch, do they? But what you're doing when you're stitching in the ditch is you're not only stabilizing your design, but you're also emphasizing a certain part. So if you've ever quilted a quilt and just done an edge-to-edge design all across it, ignoring the seams and everything, and then done the same quilt where you stitched in the ditch, it's really obvious the difference, okay? That stitching in the ditch tends to make the parts inside it a little bit more prominent. It's very subtle, but it is definitely there. So that's what I would do first. So now that we've got those heart designs stitched in the ditch, we have a couple of other areas. One is inside the hearts, and one is those background blocks I mentioned earlier. So inside the heart, you can do different types of designs. Now I'm talking about free motion quilting in this video. You could do straight line quilting, you could do ruler quilting as well, but I'm just sharing some options with free motion quilting. So one of the things you could do is you could echo that heart shape inside the hearts. Now, when you see these have been mocked up in Procreate, these samples, and the quilting or the stitching on them, the lines you see here, which are to imitate stitching, are a lot bigger than they'd be in real life. So in reality, I would have quite a few lines, each one about probably half an inch to an inch away from each other inside those heart-shaped areas. And the heart areas are kind of blocky in the piecing, but I would, do a typical heart that's curved inside. So you could do that in both of the hearts to quilt them. Now, another idea, again, sticking with inside the hearts, is you could do some swirls inside there, okay? Swirls are always really nice. That will help to soften that blocky kind of look of the hearts again. And again, I would do it in both of the hearts. Another design that I absolutely love and I use on way too many of my quilts is ease and threes. So again, you could use these inside the hearts. It's always a very elegant looking design, similar to the swirls in that it's rounded, again, kind of tending to soften the square edges of those heart shapes in here. So again, you could do ease and threes in both of the hearts. Now, I've talked about using the same designs in both the hearts. You could, of course, use, ease and threes in one heart and swirls in the other, but I think it looks better to, because there's only two hearts there, to keep the same design in both of them. Now, you've still got the background to quilt, right? So what are we going to do in the background? Well, you could keep it really simple. What I've done here is I've just done loops with heart shapes, and they don't have to be perfect heart shapes at all. People will still recognize them as hearts. But one of the things I want to talk about when comparing the quilting I've done inside the heart and the ones in the background blocks, or outside the heart, is the difference in scale. So the background I want to recede, which means I want to do a tighter quilting design in there. So smaller loops and small little hearts in there. Again, in Procreate, it looks a little bit different than that, but I wanted to just show you the design. But I would definitely make that on a smaller scale than the swirls or the ease and threes or the echoes that I'm using inside the hearts. So what that does is it will make the background recede. It's going to press it back, allowing those hearts to pop out a little bit more. So those are just a few ideas of how I might quilt this quilt a little differently should I make it again. But I'm wondering, what would you do in this situation? How would you quilt this quilt? Would you stitch in the ditch? Would you do ruler quilting, free motion, straight line quilting, walking foot quilting, what would you do? I'd love to hear your ideas, so make sure you comment below this video and let me know how you would quilt the 65th anniversary quilt. If you haven't yet seen the previous video I did on this project, don't worry, I got you covered. Check out this video, which has all the information that you need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.